Imagine you've dedicated your entire life to theater. You've stayed up late for countless nights perfecting your dancing, acting, and vocal abilities because theater isn't just a hobby, it's something you're also hoping to make your career. Now imagine on top of all that, you're constantly clowned on by the jocks of your school, the golden boys who get all the attention from students and teachers alike. And they decided making fun wasn't enough anymore. Now they also want to take over the one space that you've carved out as your own. This is High School Musical from the perspective of Sharpay Evans. Many people view Sharpay as a villain, which I'm genuinely surprised by. Is she petty, jealous, vindictive, and sometimes downright mean? Yes. But is she a full-blown villain? I beg to differ. Hi, I'm Sasha, and I like to take deep dives into childhood media in order to escape the horrors of adulthood. Sharpay was always my favorite character in High School Musical, so at first I thought maybe my defense of her was just biased. Perhaps it was my existing love for Ashley Tisdale from her time on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, or maybe I was just obsessed with how fabulous she was. I know I was definitely obsessed with the song Fabulous, but because I'm very stubborn, shout out to my fellow Tauruses, I decided to do a full-blown character study to justify why I like her so much. Because calling Sharpay a villain actually misses the whole point of the movie. You might find this hard to believe due to the fact that I've chosen to be off camera, but I was actually a theater kid. I did every play, every musical, every theater competition from freshman year to senior year of high school. So I feel like I can speak about Sharpay with a deeper understanding than most people, because I've lived in her world. We're gonna go film by film and talk about Sharpay Evans and why she deserves a lot better than to be referred to as just a simple villain. When Sharpay is first introduced, the very first line addressing her is Chad and the basketball team making fun of her. In this scene, their jokes are more about her harsh personality, but throughout the movie, Chad continues to make fun of her and theater as a whole, to an almost obsessive degree. Like, this guy is her number one hater, and I don't blame her one bit for being mean to him in return. Ashley Tisdale even confirmed in a 2025 interview that Sharpay was never meant to be popular, but she was supposed to believe that she was. My good sis was disliked and delusional. Throughout the movie, you can tell there's kind of a general disrespect for the drama club at East High. I mean, Troy literally hides his interest in it. Not just because he's scared of trying something new, but because he's scared of how his friends are going to react to it. Because again, his best friend is the person who constantly makes fun of it. I mean, do you think Miss Darbus would be forcing kids to work on their sets in detention if she didn't struggle to get kids to volunteer for it? The scene where Miss Darbus and Coach Bolton go to the principal, and then the principal tells them they need to get along, only to then show a clear bias towards the basketball team, is unfortunately a pretty accurate reflection of how the arts versus the athletic departments are treated in most American high schools. Arts programs are sadly often the first to lose funding and the last to receive it. Now, let's be honest, Sharpay and Ryan, but mostly Sharpay, aren't exactly the nicest people. But I get the sense that this is less because they're just awful people, and more so because they want to protect themselves and their passion. It's obvious in this school that people are defined by what they do. So if your thing since kindergarten has been starring in school plays, and you've been getting flack for it the whole time, you'd naturally be pretty defensive of it. If you watch their behavior more closely, they aren't mean to anyone at the auditions. They sit through all of them quietly, no matter how bad they are, and while they clearly think highly of themselves, they don't actually insult anyone there. Honestly, awful audition montages are one of my favorite movie tropes, but if we take the scene at face value, the real reason the theater department is so small isn't because Sharpay and Ryan are mean, it's because there's a clear lack of talent at this school, at least among the students who actually show up to audition. When Sharpay first speaks to Gabriella, she does say that they're welcoming to newcomers, specifically in supporting roles. Obviously, she was trying to intimidate Gabriella out of auditioning for the lead because she doesn't want to risk having competition from someone whose abilities she's not familiar with. Which is petty, but she's not trying to prevent her from signing up to audition altogether. I'm not saying it's cool to act like this towards a new person, but is this really the behavior of a villain? It's pretty obvious that Gabriella is a shy person, so Sharpay easily could have emphasized how much she loves being on stage in front of a huge auditorium full of people and watch Gabriella run off in a panic, never to be seen near the theater department again. But she doesn't. And realistically, you really don't want someone with no experience having the primary lead role in your play. Since they obviously aren't familiar with the ins and outs of what it takes to put on a show, teaching them the ropes can make rehearsals take a lot longer than necessary. Troy and Gabriella could take on supporting roles and learn what they need to about theater so that they're more prepared to go for the lead roles next year, but they don't even consider doing that. I should also point out that Sharpay's behavior in this scene is clearly influenced by her obvious crush on Troy. She's hoping one of these days he'll come to one of her shows and be impressed by her starring as the lead. So she's not just being territorial about the lead role, she's also being territorial about her crush. Again, not saying it's justified, just saying I understand it. Shortly after this scene, she looks up Gabriella, finds out that she's basically a genius, and gives her a nudge in Taylor's direction to get her to join the academic decathlon team. Her motivation behind this was obviously the fact that she wanted to steer Gabriella away from the play. And I think that was because she can tell Troy is interested in Gabriella, and in her mind, if Gabriella gets the lead role in the musical and impresses him instead of Sharpay, then she has no shot with him. I know that sounds ridiculous, but remember, we're talking about high schoolers here. I envy you if you ever had a crush in high school and didn't get at least a little delusional at some point. Troy also calls Sharpay cute at one point, so my girl wasn't that delusional. And again, I ask, is this the behavior of a villain? Her motivations are obviously selfish, but ultimately, she was helping a new student find a place where she fit in and could make new friends. Let's not forget, Taylor becomes Gabriella's best friend, and that might not have happened without this little nudge from Sharpay. The single meanest moment we see from Sharpay, where even I was like, yeah girl, I can't defend you here, was when she talks to Kelsey about the arrangement for What I've Been Looking For. Homegirl has a full-blown diva moment and is just a jerk to Kelsey, really. However, she wasn't wrong. She was in the wrong, but what she said wasn't wrong. Kelsey obviously wants to be a composer, but she keeps writing slow piano ballads, which is fine on its own, but this is musical theater. Unless you're doing a show like Les Mis, which is supposed to make you cry, most musicals stick to having 1 to 2 slow songs per act, because those aren't the songs that really excite the audience, and they're often not the most memorable. Like, let's be honest, which song do you guys play more? Bop to the Top or When There Was Me and You? What I've Been Looking For is supposed to be a happy song, so it makes sense for it to be more upbeat. The arrangement that Sharpay and Ryan did would be way more successful in a musical. And to prove my point again, which version of the song do you think of first? The one by Sharpay and Ryan, or the version on the piano with Troy and Gabriella? Kelsey also has the nerve to look irritated by the fact that they made their own choreography. Girl, what do you think musical theater is? This is an original show, which is already going to be hard to sell people on because they've never heard of it. Unless it's a well-known show, if your whole musical involves actors standing on the stage singing piano ballads, the audience is going to fall asleep. Like, they were really trying to gaslight us into believing Sharpay and Ryan were the crazy ones, when they were the only ones doing musical theater the way it's supposed to be done. You're supposed to look and feel over the top when you're on the stage, because you're trying to convey emotions in a way that will reach people who are hundreds of feet away from you. Now, Sharpay was in the wrong for shutting Kelsey down altogether and saying her input doesn't matter. But as a newbie to musical theater, Kelsey also needed to be more open-minded to collaboration. Sharpay even points out the fact that this is the first time Kelsey has had a musical she wrote be selected, whereas Sharpay has been in 17 school productions. So Sharpay's input would absolutely be valuable to a newcomer like Kelsey. Sharpay was obviously much more aggressive, but neither one of them seemed to come to that conversation with the goal of collaboration. Realistically, I think most theater troupes would hate Sharpay and Ryan for their personalities, but I don't think anyone would deny their talent. Real talk, Sharpay's crash out about the callbacks is justified, because Troy and Gabriella didn't even do an actual audition. Imagine that you just aced a job interview, and as far as you know, there's no other viable candidates. Only to be told the next day that they'll need to conduct a second round of interviews because they were impressed by a last-minute resume submission. You can't honestly tell me that you wouldn't be just as upset as Sharpay. Now, Sharpay does lie to Miss Darbus about Gabriella purposely dumping food on her and about Troy trying to sabotage the show. And at first, I thought this was pretty malicious, but there's a really important scene that takes place shortly after this that shows Sharpay wasn't lying on purpose in this scene. She genuinely believes that they're trying to ruin the show. When Chad and Taylor are conspiring to ruin their friends' lives, which I'll get to in a minute, Sharpay and Ryan see them and think that they're working to help Troy and Gabriella nail the audition. They have trouble understanding why two kids who are already popular in their respective cliques would want to branch out into other things. So they assume that Troy and Gabriella's motivation behind this is to become even more popular because if they star in the play, they'd now be the star students in multiple fields. And remember, Sharpay has been made fun of by Chad consistently for her love of theater. So she thinks that Troy is hoping to boost his popularity by making a joke out of their show because he's never shown much interest in it before. If you pay close attention, you'll notice she actually stops flirting with or paying much attention to Troy in general after this. Because in her eyes, he's gone from being a crush to being a threat to the thing that she most ties her identity to. Theater is the thing that matters most to Sharpay. She has dedicated her whole life to hopefully making this into a career for herself. And in a school where your identity is tied to one specific thing, she chose a less popular option because it makes her happy. This small scene is easy to forget about, but it's actually a key moment in understanding Sharpay and Ryan and their motivations. If the captain of the basketball team and the girl who's probably going to win the decathlon are now also the stars of the play, where are Sharpay and Ryan supposed to go? Their fear isn't really about having outsiders join the drama club. Their true fear is that people who are already accepted in other spaces will make them feel like outsiders in their safe space. And because this is the only space where they've truly felt accepted, they would have nowhere to go. Sharpay is pretty harsh towards Zeke when he tries to ask her out, but to be fair, he was actually the first one we see make a joke about her at the start of the movie. Revealing his love for baking and stick to the status quo seemed to give him the confidence to ask out Sharpay, who he's probably always secretly had a crush on. But since she's already convinced herself that the basketball team is conspiring to make fun of the drama club, she probably thinks Zeke asking her out is just an extension of that. Speaking of which, it's time to talk about Taylor and Chad. I will admit Sharpay is antagonistic towards Troy and Gabriella, but honestly, what she does to them is pretty minor compared to these two. It wasn't until watching it back again that I realized Chad honestly kinda sucks in the first movie. I was blinded by Corbin Blue's cute face and amazing curly hair, but I'm an adult now, and those things no longer hold power over me. I've already established that he's a jerk to Sharpay, but he's also the person that is more bothered than anyone else about the clique's mingling. He's a key figure against people speaking out during stick to the status quo, and he's the one constantly trying to talk Troy out of even breathing in the direction of the theater department. We do see Troy miss a practice because of his preparation for the callbacks, but Chad was bothered by it way before that happened. To me, it seemed that he heavily enjoyed the popularity and perks that came with being on a winning basketball team. And his biggest concern was that if their captain, Troy, does something that is typically viewed as uncool, it will either lessen his credit as a cool kid, or worse, it would mean kids from the drama club, which he clearly views as being beneath him, would have the chance to be seen as cool too. And Taylor's not much better. She agrees to conspire with Chad for purely selfish purposes because she wants to win the decathlon, and views the play and Troy as a distraction from that, showing no concern about what her friend might want. The two of them conspire to break apart Troy and Gabriella's friendship and budding romance. And they both only realized that they were being selfish after seeing how much they hurt Troy and Gabriella. Sharpay is set up to be a villain, but for the whole first hour of this hour-and-a-half long movie, the only person actively working against Troy is Chad. But because Chad and Taylor apologize and are forgiven by Troy and Gabriella, this creates a shift where now the rest of the cast is united, making Sharpay and Ryan appear as enemies. I think what Chad and Taylor did was way worse than anything Sharpay did. They hurt people they claim to care about on purpose for selfish reasons. At least when Sharpay's mean, she's mean to your face. If Sharpay and Ryan are the bad guys, then so are Chad and Taylor. The only truly bad thing Sharpay does is change the date of the callbacks to sabotage Troy and Gabriella. But in her mind, she's protecting the theater department. She doesn't know that they genuinely want to do the show. Sharpay is definitely paranoid, but to be fair, no one showed support for the drama club until after they got the callbacks moved. So they never really gave the drama club the time of day until their friends were personally impacted. You can see why Sharpay and Ryan would be distrustful of them up until this point. But when the basketball team comes together at the end to show support for the drama club before the callbacks, she's genuinely happy to see the support. This is the first time the jocks have really extended the olive branch to a group that's previously been othered by them. Near the end of the movie, when the auditorium is filled with kids who have most likely never been there before, Sharpay and Ryan are both clearly surprised to see so much interest, which shows that that probably isn't usually the case. On one hand, you could argue that maybe students would be more likely to show up to their shows if they were nicer, but you could just as easily argue that maybe Sharpay and Ryan wouldn't be so harsh to outsiders if they'd gotten even a fraction of this support from their peers in the past. And these people are only here to support Gabriella and mostly Troy, since most of them came from the basketball game. So, in a way, it kind of confirmed their worst fear. The most popular kid in school is auditioning for theater, and suddenly everyone is interested in it, making them feel like outsiders in their space. But thankfully, their fear of being ousted from the one place they felt accepted was unfounded. Instead of causing everyone to only care about Troy and Gabriella, the popularity of the callbacks seemed to have increased the interest among their fellow students for the theater department in general. At the end, Sharpay was cast as the understudy, and instead of being bitter about it, she wishes Gabriella good luck. She seems to have had a weight lifted off her shoulders because she realized Gabriella's interest was genuine. And I think she also learned that just because someone views theater as a hobby and not a career, it doesn't mean that they don't care about it. So if Sharpay isn't the villain of High School Musical, then who is? The answer is that there is no real villain. The whole purpose of the movie is to show that people are more complex than what they are perceived as, and that it's harmful to put someone in a box or define them by a single label. It also tackles how external pressures from society, loved ones, and peers can influence your behavior, whether it's positive or negative. It's literally the message of we're all in this together. That finale song shows everyone coming together because they finally realized that they aren't a bunch of separate groups fighting against each other. They're complex human beings, and while they may have differences, they're ultimately on the same side because all of their combined personalities and contributions are what make East High great. It's pretty rare that people enjoy sequels just as much, if not more, than their predecessors. And that is largely because of something I call the sequel curse. Unless a studio has already signed off on multiple sequels, the first movie in any franchise has to be written as a standalone in case it doesn't get a sequel. All loose ends have to be tied up by the end of the movie so that the audience isn't left wondering what happens. And this creates a problem when a movie does get a sequel because they often have nowhere to go with the story. So there's two common workarounds that are used when making a sequel. The first is to make up some lore or backstory for one or more of the main characters that for some reason wasn't relevant in the first movie, but is relevant now because we need something to move the plot forward. A prime example would be Elsa's entire storyline in Frozen 2. The second most common workaround is character regression. Lessons that were learned in the previous movie are suddenly forgotten, and sometimes characters' entire personalities change. Sharpay is a victim of this in High School Musical too. The writers were pretty clever with choosing Sharpay for this because they focused on the one thing in the first movie that wasn't fully addressed, Sharpay's feelings for Troy. While this served as a secondary motivation in the first movie, it becomes her primary motivation in the sequel. Sharpay realized that Troy was never making fun of her after all, so she still has feelings for him and she isn't giving up on them. She also tells her friends from the club that she wants the theme for the talent show to be redemption, because she's still upset about outsiders joining the drama department. Basically, since she lost out on the boy and the lead role, she's hoping to reclaim both of those this summer at the country club. In the opening, Sharpay and Ryan are portrayed as being super popular, like they're the celebrities of the school, which makes no sense because in the first movie, they were treated like any other students. And it's not like being cast as the understudies would cause a major boost in popularity. If anything, Troy and Gabriella would be the most popular kids in school at this point. In my opinion, this was done so that we would feel less sympathetic towards Sharpay. Because if this movie followed the continuity of the first one, then Sharpay and Ryan would either be treated like equals, or more like outcasts just like they feared. And we as the audience would feel like Sharpay was at least somewhat justified in her desire to seek redemption, or even revenge. But because she's now being portrayed as popular, she just comes across as a spoiled mean girl. I will admit that Sharpay does come across as a villain for the majority of High School Musical 2 to an almost cartoonish degree. And Ashley Tisdale's performance really gives us everything we could ask for. So about halfway through rewatching this, I did finally understand why people think of her as a villain, but it still didn't sit right with me to call her that. So to make sure I wasn't being completely delusional, I looked up the definition of the word villain. Merriam-Webster defines a villain as a character in a story or play who opposes the hero. Troy is the most focused on character in this movie, so I would say he's supposed to be our hero. And in that case, this definition doesn't work because she's actively working to help him get a scholarship and form connections for college. Plus, she got him this job in the first place. Most of the other definitions of villain used the words evil and cruel, which I don't feel comfortable applying to Sharpay. Sharpay acts selfishly and often at the expense of others, but she never goes out of her way to be cruel just for the sake of it. Every harmful thing she does is solely because she believes it will benefit her, and she doesn't care about the consequences. And that's when I finally accepted it. Sharpay may not be a villain, but she is definitely an antagonist. But antagonists don't have to be evil. Their primary purpose is to create conflict that drives the story forward. And if we're being real, without Sharpay, there is no story in High School Musical 2. The sequel mainly centers around Troy and Sharpay, and that's because their opposing character traits are used to teach us the same lesson. Both of them are blinded by their desire to succeed. Both of them abandon their loved ones in order to focus on their own success. The main difference is that Troy feels more conflicted in doing so than Sharpay does, probably because he was already accepted by everyone else in school. Whereas, once again, Sharpay and Ryan are portrayed with an us versus the world dynamic, which Sharpay changes to a me versus the world dynamic. To be honest, High School Musical 2 is my favorite of the trilogy, largely because someone at Disney clearly got my memo that the first movie needed more Ashley Tisdale. So, as much as it pains me to say it, High School Musical 2 kinda ruins the first movie, because it cheapens the message of it. The first movie teaches us that we should be ourselves and accept one another for our differences. But the sequel has this bizarre undertone of conformity that I didn't notice before. After being replaced by Troy in the duet, Ryan ends up joining forces with the rest of the Wildcats. And this is supposed to come across as sweet, but I was actually a little horrified at how they treated him. Because we have this whole scene with I Don't Dance where it seems like the rest of the group accepts him and he finally has friends besides his sister. But then in the next scene, Gabriella gives him flack for his flashy outfit, and from that point forward, we see him wearing a de-yesified version of his normal wardrobe. The intention of this was obviously to showcase him fitting in with the group more, but to me it just came across as him only being accepted by the group once he changed to fit in with them. It would make sense if Sharpay had been forcing him to dress flashy this whole time, but since she wasn't, it actually sends the message that Sharpay is the only person who accepts him for who he truly is. Like, it actually hurt my heart when Gabriella was roasting his outfit when he was finally trying to show team spirit. In a similar fashion, Sharpay is constantly treated like she's the weird one for liking flashy and over-the-top performances. She's a musical theater kid, what do you expect? Even though this movie itself is a musical, I mean it's literally in the title, it has this bizarrely puritanical view towards music. Despite having only written piano ballads up until this point, Kelsey states that she finds the regular piano music she has to play for work boring, and she wants to do more pop songs. But then she also complains when Sharpay has her do a much more pop version of You Are the Music in Me. So which is it, Kelsey? Do you like pop music or not? They did fix the mistake of the first movie by making Kelsey's original version admittedly better than Sharpay's rendition. So this time when Sharpay takes the song from Kelsey, it actually makes her look like a jerk instead of someone who was right but rude. But the film goes a step further by acting like Sharpay wasn't just wrong for taking the song and changing it, it acts like she was wrong for liking the style she does, period. Even though it was the style Kelsey previously stated she wanted to do. Troy even asks her if she's ever thought about just singing. Sharpay loves to perform and she loves showmanship. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong with being the type of performer who likes to just stand there and sing. But once again, this movie tries to gaslight us into thinking Sharpay, someone who loves to perform, is the crazy one because she prefers this style. It's honestly starting to feel like this is a musical movie series written by someone who actually hates musical theater. One of the main conflicts of the story is Troy's struggle to stay true to himself while trying to be successful. But between Sharpay being treated like she's a weirdo for her performance style and Ryan being encouraged to change the way he dresses, the message for the movie now feels like it's be true to yourself, unless you like being flashy and over the top. That's messed up. High School Musical 2 is trying to send the message of being stronger together, just like the first movie, but because it's told through this lens of conformity, it sends the message that you should strive to be accepted by others so that you aren't alone, even if it's at the expense of changing your own interests to fit the norm. Which is funny because we're supposed to view Troy's attempts at changing himself to fit into a different type of normal as a bad thing. And it's especially frustrating because they could have sent the message of being stronger as a team while also sending the message that you shouldn't try to change in order to be accepted by someone. And the way to do this would have been to feature Zeke more. At the very end of the movie, we see Sharpay coupled up with Zeke. And because we were all supposed to act like the scene of them getting together at the end of the first movie never happened, it's shown from the very beginning that Zeke still has a huge crush on her. The whole sequel is basically Sharpay having a long-term crash out about her unreciprocated feelings for Troy. And while for the most part, Troy doesn't ask Sharpay to change, it's obvious that he wasn't going to be interested in her with the way she currently is. So instead, Sharpay tries to introduce Troy to her world and make him more like her, in the hopes that changing him would make him see her differently. Obviously, this doesn't work. And this would have been the perfect time to highlight Zeke, the guy who has always liked her for who she is, no matter how over the top she may be. It wouldn't have taken much, just one scene where Sharpay is upset and Zeke has a heart-to-heart with her would have done the trick. Maybe this could have happened after Troy quits the show, or maybe he comforts her backstage despite being upset with her for kicking employees out of the show. It would have been an opportunity to highlight the message of going for the person who has always appreciated you for who you are, and not someone who needs you to change for them. And it would have nicely closed out the storyline of Sharpay and Troy instead of making Zeke feel like a second choice. He seems like a sweet guy, and he deserves better than that. I'll be honest, by the end of the movie, I get why everyone would hate Sharpay at that point, because she did ban everyone else from performing in the show despite knowing they were preparing for it. They wouldn't have even known about or been able to perform in this show if it wasn't for her parents giving them all jobs in the first place, but whatever. In the end, Sharpay gets tricked by Ryan and then excluded from her own show. Despite everything she'd done up until this point, I still felt sad for Sharpay in this moment. Because she purposely isolated herself from everyone in order to have this show be her big moment, and in the end, she lost both her friends and her show. And afterwards, Troy is the only one to extend any sympathy towards her by pulling her up on stage with them. So, are the other Wildcats really any better than she is? Yes, I agree that most of Sharpay's isolation from everyone was self-inflicted, but there's no moment at any point in the film where the rest of the cast tried to show her why they should stick together or even make her feel included. Heck, Ryan isn't even included until he's shown to be on his own. Sharpay gives herself a redemption at the end by giving the award to Ryan despite him betraying her at the last minute, because she clearly realized that she had in fact been taking him for granted. And she finally learned the lesson that sharing the spotlight doesn't mean it's no longer shining on her. In a way, Sharpay's growth is forced upon her, but she does still come to these conclusions on her own without a direct confrontation. I don't think a villain would be capable of that. In High School Musical 3, Troy is once again struggling with the expectations of others as he chooses between theater and basketball. When Sharpay is first introduced, she hints at her crush on Troy, and her desire to have the spotlight to herself drives her to do somewhat cutthroat things. Okay, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I have to confess, I've never really liked High School Musical 3, and it's not until watching it back again as an adult that I've been able to fully articulate why. For starters, what I just mentioned as two of the main conflicts. Someone really sat there and said, you know what would be a good idea? Let's have the characters deal with the exact same issues they did in the first movie. And every 10 minutes there's a duet between Troy and Gabriella. We get it, you're in love and conflicted. I counted and I had to listen to them duet 4 times before the next time Sharpay had a significant amount of time in a musical number. This movie should have been a send-off to all of these beloved characters, and instead it's the Troy and Gabriella show. And then they introduced these new characters whose names I've forgotten because I don't care about them. Why would I care about them? Why would anyone care about them? I'm here to watch the final chapter in the story of the characters I've been following for 2 movies already. Why would I get invested in these freshmen who don't even have musical numbers? They could have focused more on characters like Zeke, Jason, and Martha, who have all been here since the very first movie, and yet somehow they all got less lines and screen time than this super annoying guy. It feels like the writers really phoned it in for this one and ran out of ideas. And instead of developing these side characters to finally give them some more of the spotlight, they rehashed old storylines and brought on new characters that absolutely no one formed any attachment to. Prior to rewatching this, the only major plot points I could remember were Sharpay has some crazy new girl try to steal her identity like in Single White Female. The movie has Ryan and Kelsey suddenly get together because God forbid there are any queer-coded characters in this movie about musical theater. And Juilliard, the most prestigious performing arts school in the country, is considering giving a scholarship to Troy, a basketball player from New Mexico whose experience includes, let me check my notes here, 1 musical, and 1 performance in a country club talent show. And he's being considered against Sharpay, who has starred in every show since kindergarten, Ryan, who has choreographed and starred in several shows, and Kelsey, who has composed songs for entire musicals. Oh yeah, he definitely stands a chance. The one positive thing I can say is that it's the first movie in the series to finally show some appreciation for musical theater. It took 3 films, but we finally got there. But okay, back to the reason why we're here today. Sharpay. It's really obvious they didn't know what to do with her character in this movie, which seemed to be the case for most of the characters, but it's especially frustrating in Sharpay's case because there was so much potential to develop her further as a character. As I've already explained, the regression in the last movie was excusable because it made enough sense as a way to continue the story. This time around, though, it was just lazy and didn't make sense. We could have followed Sharpay as she struggles to share the spotlight, but is actively making an effort to do so. And the scholarship from Juilliard would be enough of a motivator to cause her to struggle with this. We could have watched her and Zeke finally be together as a couple since they've ended the last 2 movies together, and maybe Zeke is the one who helps her deal with these conflicting feelings. Instead, we just have Sharpay once again focusing on nothing but herself and still not being over Troy. Homegirl had 2 major character arcs already, only to be reverted back to how she was in the first movie, and it wasn't even well done this time around. It's like paving a road and then deciding you never want to drive down it. To add insult to injury, Sharpay is majorly sidelined in this movie, so it's extra confusing if we're even supposed to root for her or not. Like, on one hand, she ends up taking Gabriella's role in the musical, and so it feels like it's supposed to be her comeuppance when this doofus barges in and ruins her scene. But then, on the other hand, when the crazy British girl steals her role, we're obviously supposed to root for Sharpay when she swoops in to take it back. And those scenes happen like 5 minutes apart. There were other, better ways to showcase that Sharpay still struggles with being competitive and selfish that didn't involve making her an antagonist again. It felt really unearned this time around. And since she had so little screen time, it didn't even feel like there was a full character arc for her. It's especially confusing because I wasn't even sure what message I was supposed to take away this time around. Sharpay is ambitious, confident, and more than anything in the world, she is driven by her goal to succeed. These are good traits that we should be encouraging in kids, especially young girls. Then you have Gabriella, who is framed as the main character alongside Troy. Her main storyline is that she's dreamed of going to Stanford her entire life, and not only did she get in, she also got accepted into a special program. But she's thinking about throwing all of that away in order to stay near her high school boyfriend, even though being long distance doesn't automatically mean they'll break up. Is the audience supposed to aspire to be like her? Up until this point, Gabriella was a character we could look up to because she was intelligent, accomplished, and kind. But now she just feels like a lovesick teenager who doesn't care about her independence anymore. And mind you, the boyfriend in question isn't the one holding her back. In fact, he actively encourages her to go. Her boyfriend, her best friend, and her mom are all encouraging her to take advantage of the incredible opportunity that she herself has always wanted. And you know what finally pushes her to go? Sharpay! Sharpay tells Troy about the special program, which leads to Troy giving Gabriella the final nudge she needs to actually go. Yes, Sharpay's motivations were selfish because she was hoping to get Gabriella out of the way so that she could get the best role in the play, but once again, Sharpay acts selfishly by helping others. It's easy to forget, but Sharpay is friends with Gabriella at this point. So you could interpret this as a very ambitious girl pushing her friend towards an opportunity that she herself would also benefit from because she wants them both to succeed. Sharpay's arcs in the last two movies showed that being ambitious isn't a bad thing, but it shouldn't overshadow being kind. But this time around, it almost feels like we're supposed to dislike her for being so ambitious, even though having ambition is extremely valuable when starting your future. At the end, she's the only character not going to her dream school, even though we know she's worked just as hard as everyone else. It's clear at graduation that we're supposed to like Sharpay again, so why does it feel like she got punished even though she wasn't the bad guy? And from a female perspective, it also feels like they're pushing us to be more like Gabriella, someone who has ambition, but would be willing to put it aside for the sake of being with her man. Not a good look, Disney. Overall, High School Musical 3 was not the send-off that Sharpay, or really any of the characters besides Troy, deserved. In fact, I was left with several unanswered questions. Chad hinted that he thinks Taylor and him won't last because she's going to Yale while he's staying in New Mexico. So are they breaking up after graduation or not? Ryan only asked Kelsey to prom after Sharpay tells him to for the sake of getting her the duet song. So did Ryan always secretly have feelings for Kelsey and just use this as the chance to express them? I thought for sure there would be some sort of repercussion to him only asking her out because of Sharpay, but there wasn't. And did Sharpay and Zeke ever go on an actual date or not? But hey, aren't you glad they introduced us to this guy instead of answering any of those questions? So overall, I believe the main reason some people view Sharpay as a villain is because the story primarily centers around Troy and Gabriella. This makes it appear like Sharpay is working against them when, in reality, she's working for herself and is mostly indifferent to how it affects anyone else. Every film makes sure to include a scene where we learn about Sharpay's motivations because we aren't supposed to view her as just being an evil person. We're supposed to see her as a complex person that's capable of change, so that at the end of the movie, when she shows character development, we root for her. I think the fact that she gets redemption arcs in each film, even though it was poorly done in the last one, is what separates her from the typical movie villain. Every character in High School Musical is flawed in some way, because they were written in a way that is so beautifully human. What's amazing about High School Musical is that the story could be told from the perspective of any one of the main characters, and you would want to root for whoever the protagonist is. While I wasn't a fan of the last movie, it doesn't change the fact that the first two movies were great and were really well written. Watching them back as an adult really made me appreciate how complex the characters are. And while we all may like certain characters more than others, we aren't supposed to hate any of them. That's why all of the main characters are on the movie posters. They're consistently portrayed as equals on the posters because that's the message you're supposed to take away from it. Even though everyone is different, they should be treated as equals. Whether you like Sharpay or not, I think one thing we can all agree on is that Ashley Tisdale absolutely devoured this role. Sharpay was the funniest part of every single scene she was in, and Ashley Tisdale managed to strike the perfect balance between sincerity and being unhinged, which is not an easy thing to do. But what are your thoughts? Did I change your mind about Sharpay at all? Do you agree that Sharpay and Zeke deserved a happy ending? Do you think I'm insane for writing an entire dissertation just to defend a character that I probably wouldn't even want to be friends with in real life? Let me know! If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe for more childhood deep dives, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.